As young as Stephen Miller is, he is someone who has had more experience in opposing these forces and winning than so much of the open borders Republican establishment.
Stephen Miller is advocating the president's promises on the campaign trail.
Are you going to be coming regularly into the briefing room? Can we look forward to that? Because we enjoyed it.
I don't know, deep state, they are disconnected from reality. It's the fourth branch of government. Stephen Miller said it yesterday, therefore it must be true.
In Stephen's defense, I actually think he's a pretty smart guy who's come up with some very interesting things.
Stephen Miller is a very intelligent man. I've met with Stephen Miller many, many times. He's kept his eye on the ball from day one under the Trump administration to try to secure our border.
Many members of Congress, particularly the Democratic side, say they want a secure border. But when it comes down to voting, they never do a single thing to achieve it. White House advisor Stephen Miller pointed that out pretty clearly yesterday on CNN.
He's a brilliant guy. Okay, he's a great policy advisor.
Stephen Miller, a great policy advisor with President Trump.
Because he's obviously incredibly smart. What did you think about Stephen Miller representing the White House the way he did?
Right. Look, I think we have the smartest minds on this, and I think our immigration system badly, badly needs to be reformed.
When you're leveling those attacks against people like Stephen Miller or Tom Cotton, you're attacking the people's agenda. This is what the American people voted on. They voted on a wall.
The real irony is they accuse the president of fascism or somebody like Steve Miller like fascism, but the tactics that they're deploying are right out of Joseph Goebbels' playbook. Okay.
Stephen Miller definitely re-educated Jim Acosta and CNN on the differences between green card holders and illegal immigration.
It did appear that Mr. Miller was essentially schooling Mr. Acosta on the history of how things work in this country, including the Statue of Liberty and the requirement about English.
How are you, Stephen? Good to see you.
It's great to be here,
I'm
Laura.
sorry, but we were in our radio studio howling watching this. All my producers and I. It was very funny.
Meanwhile, Stephen Miller was ready for combat when he went on with Chris Wallace yesterday, and he was very confident in saying that everyone's got this backwards when it comes to the whistleblower.
Stephen Miller was quite right at this point about, do you only want Englishmen and Australians?
I thought Stephen Miller pointed up the important points of this issue better than I've heard anybody do it in a long time, and I would be sort of embarrassed right now if I were Jim Acosta.
Stephen Miller's extremely strong. I mean, I find it hard to believe that people look at that exchange and don't understand and cannot see that a reporter's trying to make himself famous.
Well, full disclosure, I did send a fist bump text message to Stephen Miller after that exchange.
Stephen is a dedicated servant of the American people. He's worked hard in this administration. There's nobody who knows more about this issue than Stephen Miller. So
the idea that Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller are the evil forces that are keeping real reform from happening is preposterous. Both of them are working really hard. They're both really good people. They have a more economic nationalist view of things, but Trump has had that view since the late 80s.
Get the Congress and the Democrats and the Republicans to agree on a huge package, which I'm sure Stephen Miller and the president are working on. And let's make the whole 1952 Immigration Act anew.
Do you think if you had been, I don't know, a member of MS-13 here illegally, that CNN would have had security pull you off the set?
Well, I assume if I was a member of MS-13 here illegally, they would be clamoring to get me into the voting booth.